Hello everyone, this is part 14 of What If Naruto Was Born in the Uzumaki clan, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Minato's heart stopped as the Akatsuki leader revealed himself. As the boy yelled his name and his loyalty to Uzu, both pride and fear surged through the yellow flash's heart. Proud to see his son's devotion and loyalty to the Uzumaki clan and his village. And fear, for he knew Naruto was fated to the Konoha leadership wanted his head. Most of all, he remembered the moment where he had his own son in the N. Looking at his own hands, he was startled to see for the first time in his life they were trembling. He had almost his own son. That thought alone made bile rise through his tea, and he had to fight hard not to puke. He had known from the moment he laid eyes on the boy that something was familiar about him. Now he knew why. But it also meant Naruto was the one who Kagami and all those Konoha shinobi. The mastermind behind that terrible M. The one who Kakashi. The one who nearly Rin. And the boy who also nearly his own half-younger brother, Obito Uchiha. A sea of conflicted emotions raged through Minato's heart as everything started to become a little more clear with every passing moment. The question was why Naruto had taken this path. Was it just for revenge as Konoha failed to protect Uzumaki? Or was it something much worse? Even so, his reasons would never be considered. Entire Konoha wanted his head, including Danzo, Orochimaru, Uchiha's, the shinobi, and most of all, Obito. His youngest son wanted to the Akatsuki leader for Kakashi. How little did the boy know that the one he wanted to was his own elder brother. He looked to Kushina and saw she herself was trembling as tears of joy trickled down her cheeks. But he could feel the hate burning within his elder son's heart, a raging fire that would not stop until it consumed Konoha and everything that came in his way. He stood still watching his son face the wreckage and his army alone with just his two swords that burned in green flames. "This will be the end for you," proclaimed the wreckage icily, as he raised his fingers making hundreds of Kumo shinobi step forward. "No. Now it ends for you." Hundreds of roaring Kumo forces charged towards his boy, and Minato watched his own son run towards his enemies with double the ferocity. It was a bizarre sight which he had never witnessed in his entire life, and saw even the wreckage was critically watching. Any doubts about Naruto's identity of being their son was quashed when he unleashed black chakra chains from his back and sent the entire front line of Kumo forces sailing away. Kushina's tea choked up on seeing those chains emerging from her son's back. This was her power running through his veins. He was ferocious as he started butchering Kumo forces left and right, his anger just like hers. But with grace and speed just like Minato's. She looked at Minato to see he was seeing the same thing. That person fighting on the field had inherited the best from both of them, and he was using every ounce of those powers to fight for his homeland. Naruto parried a strike from a female Kunoiki and used his other sword to her clean through the H. Without stopping, he twirled both of his swords in a smooth dance, carving through the F of the Kumo Chunin surrounding him. As the B fell to the ground in pieces, he glared menacingly at the 100 others surrounding him. He was outnumbered, and the wreckage was tiring him out. Even so, he had to fight. He raised his swords to push further towards his main opponent, but at the last moment his senses warned him. He quickly jumped back several feet just in time as arrows rained down from the skies. Surprised, he watched Kumo shinobi fall to the ground like flies. And he knew only one man in his life to have such accuracy. He looked to the skies and found that familiar vulture soaring high. Altras. Akano. Kyusuke finished firing his next volley of arrows from atop the vulture he currently sailed on. His targets fell, leaving Naruto a few less enemies to deal with. Satisfied, he looked towards his partner and rider of the bird. Akano's face was a mixture of heartbreaking sadness as she witnessed the state of her former village. Kyusuke remained silent, knowing the tears that trickled down her cheeks were of pain and fury which would soon destroy everything in her way. Her attention was on their teammate, who was still surrounded by enemies from all sides. Squad leader Naruto stands alone. Kyusuke knocked his next explosive arrow and smiled on hearing her comment. His gaze shifted in a particular direction as he smiled. Not alone. The third Raikage felt a power coming from the high mountain on the western side. He looked at the top to see another redhead boy standing there atop a dark horse. Nagato. The Kumo leader heard the Akatsuki boy whisper that name with a smile and again shifted his gaze towards the other redhead boy on that mountain. Another Uzumaki. He watched the boy unleash his sword, which brought forth a sight that stunned the Raikage. Hundreds of samurai dressed in their heavy armor and mounted atop their horses lined themselves beside the boy across the mountain. The most dangerous of them all was a man standing atop a giant dark salamander. Konan and Yahiko stood alongside Daibatsu observing the large Kumo army down the hill. The gazes were especially transfixed on the dangerous Raikage and his Jinchuriki standing ready in Biju form. Galatea saw for the first time the land of her ancestors. The ruined village whom she had served half her life. It was humbling. Salamander Hanzo observed the army of samurais who were staring down at their foes down the mountain. He watched the ever-silent Mifune standing ahead of his men. To think his old friend had managed to convince the samurai for this battle. His gaze shifted towards the redhead, Nagato Uzumaki, who stood at the helm of this army. Being the only Uzumaki amongst these men and women, Hanzo felt it right for the boy to lead in a battle for his homeland. The silence stretching across the battlefield was palpable as every person regardless of their faction watched. The Amon samurai warriors watched the young Nagato Uzumaki turn towards them. The pale redhead stared in all their eyes before giving a gentle smile as the wind ruffled his hair. For Naruto. With those words, the boy galloped his horse down the mountain. His sword raised high in the air. Yahiko, Konan and Daibatsu roared and charged after their friend on their own horses. Soon enough those kids had the entire samurai army following their lead as they all raced down the mountain with brave roars. Hanzo watched a lone vulture come down from the skies and join the members of Domino Squad. He watched Akano unleash her twin blades, Kyusuke ready with his bow, Daibatsu unleashing his giant staff, Nagato and Yahiko charging forward with their raised swords like bee brothers. And Konan was starting to create an army of paper shurikens high in the sky. They grow up so fast, don't they? Asked Mifune with a faint smile. Hanzo nodded as his gaze shifted towards Galatea, who was also observing her students charge into battle together. We must protect these new flames that shall one day enlighten Am, proposed Galatea fiercely, showing her hidden affection for those kids the first time. Well said. The three veteran Am ninjas exchanged nods and followed the young comrades into battle. Naruto was stunned. He stood still as panicked Kumo forces ran to the west in order to defend against the incoming army. He stood still as half of those same enemy forces were forced to halt as the overjoyed Akatsuki forces led by Kisame and Hiden joined the battle. The rest of the Kumo forces had to forcefully abandon their comrades in hopes of stopping the incoming army that was led by his friends. Watching all his friends ride into battle together for his sake made his eyes moist, but he didn't shed a tear. For hatred surged through his heart alongside horror as he watched the Raikage command his Biju transformed Jinchuriki. And the giant blue cat was forming a monstrous ball of energy aiming in the direction of his friends. Raikage. The Kumo leader jumped off Yugito just in time as dark chains cleaved through the position he previously stood in. As he landed on the ground, he saw the monstrous boy charging towards him. Those dark chakra chains making any of the Kumo shinobi trying to stop him to fly away. There was M in his eyes as he wrapped his long chains across Yugito's transformed cat state. The Raikage watched in horror as those chains tightened around his Jinchuriki and with one brutal yank made her giant cat fall brutally to the ground, thereby disrupting the Bijudama from destroying the samurai forces. He heard Yugito's painful scream as dark chakra tendrils and green flames struck her form. A monstrous intent spread across the battlefield as the enraged Raikage roared. His heavily muscular body now bathed in lightning armor. Furious, he charged and was right in front of the stunned boy in a lightning flash. The panting boy was recovering after injuring Yugito so badly which left him completely defenseless. Mercilessly the Raikage sent his lightning cackling hand to tear through the stunned boy's sea, only to have that same hand be stopped mid-air by a firm grip of another hand. A similar pair of icy blue eyes like the boy's met against the Raikage's. They reeked of the same quality of anger and iciness as they stared at the Raikage. The shock of blonde hair and that well-known face made the Raikage raise his eyebrows. The yellow flash. The bone-crushing punch that connected with his jaw sent the raikage flying the next second as a fiery redhead arrived beside the yellow flash. The third raikage flexed his jaw and flipped in the air, making a graceful landing just in time to hear a revelation from the couple that froze his heart. "You will not kill our son." Surprised, the raikage stared at the three of them. Looking closely, he found those words to be true. The boy had inherited Kushina Uzumaki's fiery red hair and temper, but his face and those blue eyes were just like his father's. Even the way the raikage had seen the boy fight resembled his parents. Those powerful chains of his mother, and the brilliant mind and speed of his father. He was their son. The Kumo leader glanced across the field to see his forces were now the ones to be outnumbered and surrounded. His men were falling like flies courtesy of the Akatsuki and newly arrived samurai forces. Yugito was trapped in the boy's chains and was badly injured. And now the Yellow Flash and Kushina Uzumaki had arrived on the battlefield. He could fight them all, even kill these three, but would not survive their enraged forces who would butcher him down along with his men. The outcome was certain now in his mind. Gritting his teeth, he furiously stared at the two people who had foiled his great plans. "Well played, Konoha. Well played," mocked the raikage. Minato narrowed his eyes dangerously at the Kumo leader. The fool was assuming this to be all Konoha's fault, considering two of Konoha's most powerful warriors now stood before him. And the raikage now assumed those fighting samurai to be the ones from the Fire Daimyo's court. "Be ready for war," warned the raikage. Desperate, he glanced in Yugito's direction but saw Kisame Hoshigaki standing near the woman who now lay injured on the ground, her transformed state destroyed. Kisame met the raikage's mad eyes and firmly sa sword ahead of Yugito's head. The swordsman unleashed his sharp sword and stood ready. The third raikage could see just by looking in this man's eyes that he was no ordinary shinobi. He was openly challenging a kage to fight for his injured Jinchuriki. If that was not enough a challenge, Hiden stepped beside Kisame and his monstrous scythe down the ground in open challenge. And finally Naruto himself walked forward, stood beside his strongest warriors, his twin swords burning in green flames ready to strike. Minato and Kushina took attacking positions around the Kumo leader and completed surrounding him. "Get away, Raikage." Daibatsu crushed the skull of the Kinkaku with his staff, preventing her from warning her leader. Up in the sky on the vulture, Kyusuke stood ready with his bow aimed at the dark-skinned giant man. Akeno stepped beside her squadmates and glared hard at the man who played a hand in destroying her village. Fearless as her clan, she spit right below the raikage's feet. "Surrender or don't, we don't care," said Naruto icily. Across the battlefield the samurai were making quick work of the remaining Kumo shinobi, and they were supported by the lunatic cult members who were any Kumo shinobi they got their hands on. Naruto looked the raikage right in the eye and knew what choice the man was going to make, so he spoke. "Run away, raikage. Soon enough I will bring fire and be to your nation. You'll regret that, Uzumaki Naruto." In a bright lightning flash, the Kumo leader vanished out of sight, much to the disappointment of the warriors surrounding him. Naruto glanced across the battlefield to see the fighting was down along with the last of the Kumo forces. Victory was his. It was so surreal and not at all what he had planned or expected. But yet it had all happened, even so nothing mattered because they had won Uzu back. He glanced across the field to see the two people who knew more than anyone else what this moment meant to him. He swiftly walked forward as one of his two oldest friends did the same. Yahiko smiled as Nagato embraced his best friend in a bone-crushing hug. Hearing footsteps, both the boys turned together and caught Akeno as she flew right in their arms with tears falling from her eyes. The three best friends held each other as fiercely as they could because for once there were tears in all their eyes, for they remembered running away with the last of their kin as their village was destroyed. They remembered the months of hardship they suffered as they tried to survive in the harsh world. They remembered the moment when Konoha forces butchered them and their kin and took many hostage. Yet they didn't falter. Family, duty, honor, holding their clan's values deep in their heart, the three fought for each other with everything they had. They fought for those few of their kin still alive. They fought hard to get them a new home in Am. And now they fought and won their home back. They were home. No words were said, yet their feelings reflected in their eyes. All that pain, suffering, struggle, battles, quarrels, they had survived. Nagato and Naruto smiled before laying a soft kiss each on Akino's cheek, which made her blush red. But yet they were laughing. Even Naruto, Minato and Kushina watched those three kids laughing and knew that the decision to fight was the right one. Most of all, they were watching their son laugh. They were watching tears of joy falling from his eyes as he held what were probably his best friends in his arms. All their lives they had only remembered the sweet cry of their infant son before he was taken from them. And now they were seeing him laugh. Kushina wanted to storm forward and sweep her son in her arms. She wanted to hold him, kiss him, say so many things, but Minato gripped her shoulder and gently shook his head. Not now. But, patience, Kushina. She glared at him hard but didn't go against his suggestion as Naruto and his friends quickly got over their cheering. With determined nods, those three kids stood together and were joined by others of similar age. And together they stormed through the gates of a zoo. Few hours later, chaos, fear, anger, hatred, mistrust, despair, defeat, surrender. Naruto stood in a room full of dozens of people who were arguing with each other like mad dogs. Accusations and curses were flying left and right, many people on the verge of exchanging blows, several trembling in an unknown fear. It broke his heart to see his once proud people reduced to such state. In front of his eyes were the last few elders of the Uzumaki clan. They looked abused with bruises across their elegant faces having now lost their charm, their once brave eyes now full of fear and cowardice. And these Uzumaki were right now shouting at Minato and Kushina for Konoha's failure to support them in the darkest hour. They were angrily staring at the unknown samurai and shinobi, fearing they were just another group of oppressors wearing different flags. They were throwing insults at the Akatsuki forces currently protecting a zoo. He looked at his two Uzumaki friends to see they were equally shocked as well. And he didn't know what to do now. He felt a hand gently clasp his own and looked to see Konan stepping beside him. She was grimly observing the mayhem going on even as Hanzo and Mifune silently sat in a corner of the room simply observing. What should I do? Asked Naruto helplessly. Be the voice of unity. He looked at her to see a fire in her eyes that was urging him to not give up. Even if he had won back Azu, he had no standing among these people. Never once had he been allowed to voice his opinion before in the matters of the clan. How was he supposed to now? I'm a bastard, Konan, he said helplessly. She nearly crushed his hand with her insane grip, whether on hearing his situation or anger at the people who raised him as such, he didn't know. Not to me, she whispered fiercely. She looked at him to see he was still conflicted and he was not wrong. She had seen the wary looks he had received when they stormed the village and started freeing the Uzumaki prisoners. People had flocked to Nagato and Akino in droves and embraced them wholeheartedly. Some had even fallen to their knees and thanked those two. Yet all Naruto had gotten was small nods of thanks. It was a harsh reflection of how his own people treated him, which was in stark contrast to the way they treated his legitimized Uzumaki friends. She had never much understood the tradition of bastards. Children were children, no matter if their parents were married or not. It didn't matter if they true born like Nagato and Akino or bastards like Naruto. They were all equal in her eyes. But not for the Uzumaki, who still stared at Naruto with only the barest of respect and acceptance. After all he had done for them, it made her boil. Yet despite all of this, he stepped forward for his people. Enough. His firm voice silenced the bickering people as a sea of redheads now stared at the young Naruto Uzumaki. An old woman with short red hair that were turning gray stared at the boy in disapproval. We are grateful that you did your duty, Naruto. But you know that you have no legal right to address the elders, being a. Where were you when our village was being destroyed, bastard? You were Katsuro-sama's trusted ninja, yet you ran away and left your people alone. What else can we expect from a bastard? Kisame, who was previously not at all interested, firmly gripped his sword, but one look from the boy stilled his hand. He watched. It was the elders who were leading the unfair bashing against his leader. There were several young Uzumaki who wanted to protest but were fearful of the eldest in their clan. It was a heavily patriarchal society in which Naruto still didn't have a place despite all he had done. What shocked Kisame most was the silent manner in which the boy accepted it all. It was as if he had faced this his entire life. But he was helpless to act since the boy himself had forbidden him from stopping those handful elder Uzumaki currently bashing him. He could see Kushina Uzumaki trembling in horror, and if not for Minato's firm restraining hand, there was going to be another M. And then he saw something that made his eyes go wide. That redhead boy named Nagato and the girl Akino stepped forward. Before anybody could act, the heads of two shouting elders were severed right in the middle of the large hall. Naruto watched in silent horror as his friends the ones berating him. They were about to K more when Konan shook her head, which made them stop. The rest of the Uzumaki clan was now in a state of sheer shock. And then Konan stepped forward. Konan, he whispered in shock. Show too much kindness, then people won't fear you. They don't fear you, they don't follow you, she said icily. He looked at the rest of his friends to see something he had never seen before. They were willing to fight for him, to K for him, to S for him, and S anyone that did him injustice. Nobody had ever done anything like this for him until today. To think Nagato and Akino even S their own kin for his sake. He looked at the rest of his clan, most of them were young and terrified. Especially after witnessing their elders being K right in front of their eyes. Whatever plans he had were destroyed when Akino and Nagato had started K the elders. Be the Uzumaki you always have been, urged Konan, and smiled when he gave a faint nod. In a corner of the room stood a man whose eyes were fixed on the nervous boy who now stood before his clan. Looking at him, Minato could finally see his real son that was buried deep beneath a sea of hatred and pain. The boy standing before him was the true Naruto Uzumaki. A bastard who never received the name or love of his parents. A boy who was feared and frowned upon by his own clan for his powers and for being a bastard. Neither things the boy had any control over. His insecurities, his fears, the pain he had endured his entire life, Minato could see it clearly. Kushina was weeping in his arms after seeing all this. Her heart broken to see her only son suffer for the mistake of his parents. But she didn't see that despite all of this, their son had a heart bigger than every person present here. Despite all the hardships he must have endured, he had only emerged stronger and stronger. Those 6 teenagers surrounding their son had their weapons drawn and were glaring down at anyone opposing their friend. He was loved and cherished by these 6, which lessened some of the enormous guilt both of his parents felt. Kumo will come for us, said Toka Uzumaki, one of the younger heirs of the noble Uzumaki houses. You cannot expect us to trust Konoha, or these Akatsuki, or these samurai. Not after everything that has happened to our people, defended Arima Uzumaki, another noble. They could be just another invaders, shouted another voice. We fought for Naruto Uzumaki. And we are not invaders, warned Hanzo tersely, making many men flinch. Stunned silence spread across the great hall, which was disrupted by the sound of a cane hitting the ground. Naruto was surprised to see Hinata Uzumaki step out of the crowd. She was the oldest member of their clan still alive and the widow of the second Azukage. He gave her a weak smile as she slowly came forward and rested a hand on his cheek. She did the same for Nagato and Akino and spoke to them in a very tearful voice. You came back for us, whispered the old lady, as a lone tear fell from her eye. She stared at Naruto with a look he couldn't decipher. The old woman was one of the few who had been kind to him. They didn't know each other closely, but Hinata-sama had always treated him like a true Uzumaki and not a bastard. To see her alive and standing before him made everything worth it. Katsuro, the third is child. She watched as Naruto painfully closed his eyes but couldn't manage to release a tiny sob. The boy had been very close to the third, and despite knowing this truth deep in his heart, it was very difficult to hear it from someone else that dashed any tiny hope left in his heart. Hinata-sama, we must flee before Kumo, Kiri or Iwa come back and finish us. The war is over, requested Toka Uzumaki. The war is not over, girl. The enemy won't rest until the last one of us falls, counted Hinata, her dark eyes shining with barely suppressed anger at those 3 villages. She was further disappointed when she saw the desire to run away, to hide, to cower in fear, to disappear in the eyes of her people. They had lost all their pride, their confidence and faith in themselves and their clan. Your eldest daughter was L&M by Kumo Shinobi, Lord Arima. You bent your knee to save your youngest son. If you run now, will you ever be able to look that child in the eye? Asked Nagato seriously, which made the noble look down in shame. Your husband and sons laid down their lives for this village, Lady Toka. They fulfilled their oaths to this village honorably, yet now in our village's direst hour you propose to flee. You dishonor their spat Akino angrily. Katsuro-sama is We barely have a few hundred ninjas who are in no shape to fight, we have to protect the weak women, children and the elderly. How are we supposed to fight back when we don't even have a leader who can guide us? Asked Lady Toka tearfully, as memories of her family for the village were brought out by Akino. There is one. Hushed whispers and murmurs spread across the great hall as Nagato said those words. He walked towards the center and stared at everyone and then at his friend who paled. Naruto Uzumaki fought for our clan. He protected our children and got them safely to Am. He saved my life and Akino's countless times. He faced armies, cages, even a Jinchuriki for us and emerged victorious. There is no one greater than him, said Nagato proudly. But he's a. Nagato had his sword placed on the edge of the middle-aged man's tea before he even uttered that insult. When he spoke, his voice was icy and full of fierce determination. I don't care if he's a bastard. Our Uzumaki B runs through his veins, warned Nagato. Many Uzumaki paled on seeing that monstrous white wolf growl at him from Naruto's side. Its B-red eyes daring anyone to go against Nagato. Nagato speaks the truth, everyone. My son for Katsuro, the third. I never thought we'd find another leader like him in my lifetime. I advised you all to surrender because I didn't want more Uzumaki to in vain. But I was wrong. The old woman looked at her younger clansman in the eye and pointed her finger at the boy. Naruto Uzumaki avenged the He is the white wolf. The fourth. Naruto went deathly pale and stared in shock as Lady Hinata knelt before him and bestowed upon him a lure only 3 Uzumaki had ever held before. Seeing Hinata Uzumaki kneel and accept him made a series of nods and positive whispers pass among the crowd. Lady Toka looked at him for several long moments before stepping forward herself and unleashing her sword. Our people have not treated you kindly and for that I truly apologize. My house wishes to correct that mistake and pledges itself to you, Lord Fourth. Another series of murmuring followed as Lady Toka knelt and several more Uzumaki followed her which brought forward Lord Arima who had the most number of ninjas alive in his house. I did not fight by your side in the battle to reclaim our home and I will regret it. I knelt when I should have fought for our home, and for that I am truly sorry, said the Lord honestly. We will make them all pay, Lord Arima, promised Naruto, making the man smile. Our revenge has just begun, brothers. My house pledges to fight again for our clan and this village as we have for several decades. And I will fight for Naruto Uzumaki. Shocked gasps echoed across the hall as Arima Uzumaki unleashed his sword and pointed it at Naruto. Lord Fourth. Naruto watched in stunned silence as Arima Uzumaki knelt before him. He looked at Hanzo and Kisame to see the men smiling just in time as all his friends raised their swords and yelled. The fourth. The Uzumaki clan erupted. The fourth. The fourth. The fourth. The fourth. Kushina found Minato observing something in the distance. There was unending pride in his eyes and when she discovered the source she couldn't help but smile. On top of Western Mountain near a zoo was the figure of young boy sitting atop a giant white wolf. Wearing simple dark black pants and a traditional red-colored Uzumaki shirt that complemented his bright red hair. A heavy dark black leather coat made of soft fur was hanging from his shoulders protecting him from the cold winds. His face remained hidden behind a dark black face mask that covered all but his eyes. A long sword held by 3 former Azukages rested firmly on his waist. The fourth. He surpassed me, said Minato with a fond smile on his face. I never thought I'd see him, much less see him become the youngest Kage in shinobi history. Even Hiruzen-sama was 2 years older than him when he became Hokage, commented Kushina proudly. Minato's senses gave him a warning and he shifted his gaze from his son to his right and saw a silver-haired girl glaring at them. She approached them confidently but what startled him was how much hatred was there in her eyes as she looked at him and Kushina. It was reflected in the first words she said to them. So, you're both his parents, spat Akino, earning a narrowed look from Kushina herself. Who are you? Asked the Uzumaki mother. Someone who has been by your son's side more than either of you. Akino smiled when her hateful words made these two flinch a little. She couldn't understand as to why Naruto was even allowing them to stay in a zoo. When confronted by her he had given her an unreadable look and said he'd handle it. Knowing him and his big heart, she feared these two cowards would again take advantage now that their long-forgotten son was now the Uzukage. She might not agree with Naruto's grand plan to change the entire world, but Akeno did wanted Konoha to burn. Azu and Konoha had shared ties of B, and their alliance was more than that of partners. They had been two families, different yet branches of the same tree. And then Konoha betrayed their own kin in the worst manner. She could never forget those Anbus as they butchered her people. Never forget that dark lab where she and the other Uzumaki children would have been experimented upon and violated in the worst manners had Naruto not come to their rescue. Konoha had betrayed their own, just like these two people standing before her. To betray one's family was the worst crime any Uzumaki could commit. She was disgusted as these two stared at Naruto with pride. What the hell did these two even know? Did they know about the years Naruto suffered as bastard? The subtle ways in which their son suffered discrimination everywhere he went. The wary looks and veiled insults he received for being a bastard with dark powers. Despite it all, Naruto had more honor and a bigger heart than either of his parents. He was born a bastard, but he had lived his life like any true Uzumaki. Family, duty, honor. She and the rest of her friends knew the kind of person Naruto was. And helping him become the fourth was probably the best thing they ever did in their lives. For Akeno truly believed he was the right choice for her clan, and she was not going to allow these two to ruin him. You're not welcome here. The sooner you go away the better it will be for him, warned Akeno. Kushina had enough of the insults and was ready with a retort of her own when a new voice spoke. That's enough, Akeno. They all turned around to see Nagato walking towards them with a determined expression on his face. Akeno didn't know why, but ever since they returned to Azu she had sensed a rising coldness within her usually gentle friend. Out of all three of them, Nagato was the most kind-hearted, but after witnessing what Kumo and the other two great villages had done to his home, something had within him. He stared at Minato with apathy but relayed the message nonetheless. Town square, now. Almost the entire village had gathered by the time their small party arrived. Akeno spotted the Am group standing in a silent corner along with their samurai comrades. The Akatsuki forces were tasked with manning the borders of Azu because the clan was still wary of them, which Akeno was grateful for. The entire Uzumaki clan was present. And the reason for them was in the open for all to see. Dozens of Kumo commanders, Kinkaku forces, and other junior officers remained hanged to their deaths. Kushina gasped in horror to see all those had their eyes see out, their ears missing, noses punctured. On top of their foreheads the Uzumaki symbol was carved in B. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki looked at her clan members to see not even one of them was appalled or disgusted. Yes, the Kumo ninjas had to pay with their lives. But not like this. What terrified Kushina was the blank stares of many young Uzumaki children as they saw all the in their eyes. She could see all innocence was lost. All feelings were drowned by the atrocities they had suffered the past year. They were no longer children, but K-machines who wanted B. At the center of the E stage was a disheveled woman who was crying. Kushina identified her as the young Yugito Ni, the Jinchuriki of the two tails. The Kumo commander did not seem much injured, bruised but unharmed. Yet the reason for her agony and tears was something much worse. Yugito was bound in sealing chains that prevented her from moving even as she desperately tried to reach a young woman who had similar blonde hair like her. On closer observation, Minato noted the facial similarities and had a feeling it could be Yugito's younger sibling. And her tea was open. The crowd soon parted as the sound of footsteps approached near. Minato saw it was his own son, Lord Fourth, walking forward towards Yugito with the sword of Uzukage in his hands. One of the noble lords, Arima, stepped forward. My lord, you need not sully your hands with the B of someone like her, proposed Arima sincerely. Kushina watched her son's young eyes look at all the enemy ninjas and a faint disappointment rose in his eyes. Who them in such manner? He asked, making many flinch on his cold tone. I did, my lord. Akeno gasped, Nagato flinched, Conan's eyes widened as well as the real culprit came forward. It was a teenage boy, maybe 2 years younger than Naruto. So did I, said another young girl. Me too. They deserved it. Naruto remained stoic as he watched dozens of his clan children claim responsibility for this barbarism. He himself had seldom lived by honor many times, The Uzu leaders had also performed many dishonorable acts by creation of S program, but it had to stop. His clan was known for their loyalty and honor. He may not be the best example of that, but as their chosen leader it was his duty to reinstate that same honor within his clansmen which they had lost. Yet behind these children he could sense the support of the rest of the clan. It seemed they were all in this act together. You dishonor our name, everyone. These ninjas should have been for their crimes, but not in this fashion, said Naruto honestly. Sheer rage shone across dozens of Uzumaki faces, and in those eyes he saw a glimpse of the horror they must have been through. They L&M our girls. They butchered our people. They us. He allowed them all to vent their anger for several long minutes and quietly listened to the horrors endured by his people. Still, he kept his own feelings in check, remembering that he no longer had the freedom to act impulsively. He was the fourth Uzukage, and it was his job to respect the law held by the great men before him. So he just said those three golden words. Family, duty, honor. He smiled as even in the sea of anger flowing among his people, many of them lowered their heads on remembering the motto of their clan. Hanzo smiled on seeing the crowd being silenced with those simple words. The boy was doing the right thing, whether he believed in it or not was another matter. However, it was vital he get the rest of the clan back on track lest they become savages thirsting for be like madmen. In wars before and the ones to come, we may witness and be forced to do many horrible things. But Katsuro-sama always said that the S should be respected no matter who they are. These ninjas were our enemies, now they are not. Let them rest and allow your pain to heal, he urged. We will make our enemies pay for their mistakes, but we must not become the monsters ourselves. A war will happen, the villagers who attacked us will pay, the culprits will face judgment, but when all of that is over I want you all to promise me something. Hundreds of eyes lost their anger after listening to him, and he smiled on seeing that there was still a part of his clan alive in these people. Swear on the lives of your children and your grandchildren that you all shall strive to build a better world, not just for our clan, but for the world. I dream of a future where the Uzumaki are respected and not feared. The crowd roared with promises and oaths, beaming smiles replaced haunted looks, hope arose in place of fear. Minato couldn't help but see the difference in his son. During their first battle and even in the one for Uzu, he had fought like a beast out for B. However, now that the battle was won, in his eyes Minato didn't see the desire for more violence. He simply wanted justice, and it made him wonder as to what he could offer his son to make peace with Konoha. When his son tried to move forward, he was stopped by another lord who didn't want his young hands to get stained with Yugito's B. Naruto's answer was befitting that of a responsible Kage. A Kage should be willing to get his hands dirty even with B so that they never forget the value it holds. The crowd watched as Lord Fourth stepped up to the platform. His eyes met with Yugito's, and for a few seconds both ninjas exchanged a handful words that were barely above a whisper. When Naruto gave a nod, the last Kumo ninja lowered her head in resignation. Wiping his sword free of B, Naruto turned towards a few of his Uzumaki clansmen. Kumo shinobi are buried in the mountains when they S. These ones and the ones that S on the battlefield shall be given the same burial. Lay them to rest with honor, he commanded in a voice that didn't leave any room for protest. Neither did any Rose as well. His eyes connected with those of his parents who were staring at him with a look he couldn't decipher. With Kumo stirring for war, he had to put this to rest. Thankfully, he didn't need to verbally tell him to follow him because his father understood and made Kushina as well as himself follow after him as Naruto walked towards the outskirts of the village. Minato shivered as the cold winds brushed past his skin. Having already handed off his jacket to Kushina, he couldn't help but experience the cold weather of Uzu and saw the warm clothing worn by his son. The boy was very perceptive as he looked at him and spoke. Winter is coming. No sooner had he said those words was he then assaulted by a red blur that engulfed him in a fierce embrace. Minato smiled on seeing Kushina touch their son after so many years. She was crying and held him so fiercely like Minato had never seen before. The yellow flash feared the boy would push her away, but instead just for a brief moment his own eyes became moist before he closed them. But the serene moment was not to last. Because he ended the embrace not 5 seconds later. Kushina longed for his touch but her boy moved away. Son, your child S the day you abandoned him, Kushina. I owed you one debt for giving me life which I fulfilled by saving yours on the battlefield, he spoke, Yet his voice didn't carry any hatred or bitter feelings but just plain acceptance of the hand dealt to him by fate or karma. You don't understand. I didn't want to leave you, screamed the anguished mother. Then why did you? In those 4 simple words he allowed his life's pain to seep in. All those nights he had cried as a child for his mother, the days of seeing young sons playing with their fathers, the festivals where happy families enjoyed together. He could yell at these two, try to inflict that pain they had made him feel, but it would only make him feel worse. So he simply stared at them with his haunted eyes full of pain. Why did I live as a bastard when my own parents were alive? Kushina was weeping badly after hearing the pain in his voice. She wanted to hug her boy, but Minato could see that she was using all her strength not to do that because Naruto didn't want that. Yet there was a difference in the way their son stared at Kushina, and at Minato. When he looked at her, there was a faint hope of understanding, perhaps even sympathy. The boy may not know it himself, but he longed for a mother. But when he looked at Minato, there was disappointment. For it was a man's duty to look after his lover and their children, it was a man's duty to protect them from harm from the entire world itself. And Minato knew he had failed on all counts. After seeing the boy's loyalty to Izu, he doubted his son would ever accept the truth of why he was abandoned. The second Uzukage who oversaw the exchange with Hiruzen was S, and after attacking Kumo to save Izu. Minato doubted Hiruzen would ever aid him in any manner. You can't have both, but he can have one. Because of me. Kushina recoiled in shock on hearing Minato say that. She looked in his eyes and saw resignation. When they exchanged glances, she knew he was S himself and urged her to remain silent. Why? Asked Naruto sadly. You nearly killed your mother during her pregnancy. The doctors warned me that your chakra network was not stable and it would kill her if she gave you birth. I wanted her to abort, but she never gave up on you. She fought against me, against the Hokage and the Konoha leadership. She endured pain you cannot imagine and gave you life, admitted Minato, and could look at his son without fear because this much was the truth. The next part wasn't. The doctors warned all of us that your powers were unstable and will only spiral out of control as you aged. You would become a grave threat not just to your mother but to Konoha itself, lied Minato, for if his son ever found the real truth then he would lose faith in the Uzumaki, in his village, in himself. And Minato could not allow that after seeing the potential in his son. Naruto could do great things as a Uzukage which Minato could never do as a Junin of Konoha. So you gave me away? Asked Naruto sadly, his disappointment clearly evident in his voice, but there was no hatred because just like Minato had said, his dark powers were unstable and had caused many grave accidents in Izu itself, leading his clan to become wary of him. He could understand the rational side of Minato's decision, but it still hurt worse than any pain. I loved your mother and my village. I couldn't let them get hurt, so I asked the Hokage to request the Uzumaki to take you away. Your clan were masters in Fuinjutsu and I had hoped they would be able to help you in controlling your powers. Kushina begged me not to, but I refused, said Minato stoically, yet with each word he essayed little within. For he knew after this, he would never see his son, he would never see Kushina. Never be able to live alongside the family he had always desired. I understand. The disappointment vanished from Naruto's eyes and was replaced by bitter understanding. There was no forgiveness in his eyes, but he understood why everything happened the way it did. Minato looked at Kushina and gave her an encouraging nod, whispering words that broke her heart. Protect him. What will you do now? Asked Naruto silently, looking at his father and saw a truly honorable ninja standing before him. I have made many mistakes in my life, most of all I failed my family. But that does not change the fact that I have loved you both and Konoha with all my heart. I won't let either suffer for my mistakes, promised Minato. Naruto's eyes widened as he understood what this man was going to do. Despite the disappointment in his heart he held for this man, it didn't change the fact Minato was his father. Strangely, they both could understand each other without words. A feat which he could only share with Konan and Hanzo. You're going to attack Kumo alone, realized the young son, but didn't say that out loud, which earned a grateful look from his father. It was the only choice left for Minato Namikaze. Naruto could see it in those familiar blue eyes that he had inherited. This man didn't want to kill him despite everything he had done to harm his village. Minato also didn't want to betray Konoha by bringing water its footsteps. Most of all he wanted to fix things for his broken family and home. Not many men could brave up to take such a decision. Family, duty, honor. His eyes teared up as he walked forward towards his father. Minato did the same with a few tears of his own, and when they embraced, Naruto could not help but feel an empty part in his heart be filled again with happiness and sadness together. For he knew this would be the first and last time he would ever embrace his father. I won't let Kumo's armies harm your people or my own. The Raikage will pay for his mistakes, promised Minato fiercely, as he tightened his hold on his son, stifling back a sob of his own. Said Naruto helplessly. I want you to promise me something. As an Uzumaki and my son. Naruto didn't hesitate in nodding to his father's request. There were no more debts between them, no animosity, just a relation of being feelings. I don't know what Konoha did to anger you, but there are good people in the village. Talk to them and try to find a solution, because war will only bring more misery and pain. Either way, I won't live long enough for that, even so I know you will become a better Kage than I could ever hope to be. And I'm proud of you, said Minato honestly with a smile as he ruffled his elder son's hair. The young Uzumaki couldn't stop the tears from rolling down his eyes and gripped his father tightly. If only things had been different, if only. I want you to promise me that you would protect your mother. She loves you more than anything and has suffered for no fault of her own. Let her spend the rest of her life by your side and that of her clan, urged Minato. I promise. A great burden was lifted from Minato's heart on hearing his son say that. It made his next request much easier. He whispered his request very quietly into his son's ear and waited anxiously to hear his reply. After long seconds of agonizing silence, Naruto gave him the promise Minato desperately wanted. I can rest in peace now, thought Minato. All his life he had never been able to give his first child anything. As a father, that was one of the worst feelings he had experienced, so without compromising Konoha's safety he decided to give his son the one thing he had created on his own. Obito may have gotten all his love, but Naruto would get his knowledge. Naruto felt a scroll being passed into his pocket by his father. He was about to ask what it was when Minato said it would help him accomplish his dreams and make him stronger. They remained embraced like that for a few long moments before Minato gently broke the hug and looked at him. I'd like some moments alone with your mother, he requested kindly with a small smile. Naruto nodded and started walking away, but stopped a few steps later and stared back at his father. Minato was stunned on seeing immense pride for him in his son's eyes. You're the greatest ninja I have ever known. And I promise the world will remember you, Minato the loyal. Minato smiled. Farewell, son. Naruto gave a faint smile of his own. And you too, father. He saw for a last second the impact his acknowledgement had and quickly turned around and started walking away. He didn't look back even as tears slipped from his eyes like a raging river. For 3 days later he would receive ravens informing him about the Battle of B Hill, where more than 5,000 Kumo shinobi alongside the third Raikage. And with them Namikaze Minato. The yellow flash. His father. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.